You ever get the feeling that something is just off with the economy? I mean, it's not a total crisis, but there's this weird lack of energy, right? A kind of constant sluggishness. Well, it turns out there's a name for what's going on, and it's called the zombie economy.
And this isn't just a hunch. Get this. According to the Bank for International Settlements, a shocking 1 in 5 major corporations are technically insolvent. They don't make enough money to even cover the interest on their own debt. And yet, somehow, they're still in business.
So that raises a huge question, doesn't it? If that many businesses are functionally broke, why aren't we seeing this massive wave of bankruptcies? Why does it feel less like a dramatic crash and more like the whole economy is just stuck in first gear?
Well, the answer lies with a new kind of player in our economic story. They walk among us, they consume resources, and they slow everything down for everybody else. They are, quite literally, the economy's living dead.
Now, this isn't about lazy companies or just plain bad management. Not in the old school sense anyway. The real phenomenon that's driving all this economic drag has a name that, honestly, hits the nail on the head. The zombie company.
Okay, so what exactly is a zombie firm? It's not just a company having a bad year or two. The official definition is actually very specific, and you kind of need to understand it to get the whole picture.
The definition is really precise. We are not talking about startups, burning cash to grow. No, a zombie firm is a mature company, 10 years or older, that for 3 years straight, at least, can't even generate enough profit to pay the interest on its loans. They are, for all intents and purposes, on financial life support.
So let's just break that down. A healthy firm, right? It uses its profits to invest, to innovate, to grow. A zombie firm, it has no profits left over. It's only staying alive by taking on new debt just to pay the interest on its old debt. It's a financial treadmill that's going absolutely nowhere.
In a healthy, functioning economy, these companies would just fail. There's a process for this. It's called creative destruction. The idea is that inefficient companies die off, and that frees up their resources, their people, their capital, for new, innovative companies. But zombies, they stop this natural cycle dead in its tracks.
So the big question is, how did we get so many of them? This wasn't some natural market thing. It was something we actually created, completely by accident, thanks to a series of huge economic interventions.
It all really kicks off after the 2008 financial crisis. To save the economy, central banks all over the world dropped interest rates to basically zero. This was the ZIRP era, zero interest rate policy. Debt became unbelievably cheap. Then, just as things were maybe starting to normalize, the pandemic hit and we flooded the system with even more stimulus. The end result? For over a decade, it was just easier and cheaper for banks to keep lending to these failing companies than to admit the loans had gone bad.
Now, you might be thinking, all right, so what? A few weak companies get to stay afloat, what's the big deal? But this isn't a contained problem. Think of it like an infection that slowly spreads and weakens the entire economic body.
Economists call this the congestion effect, and it's a perfect description. Like a massive traffic jam, a few slow-moving zombies can bring the entire highway to a grinding halt, creating this system-wide drag on productivity for everyone.
And here's exactly how they do it. They trap workers in these dead-end jobs, they hoard capital that could be going to exciting new startups. To make quick cash, they slash their prices, which makes it impossible for their healthy competitors to actually turn a profit. And just by existing, they're taking up market space, making it harder for new, better companies to even get a foot in the door.
The best analogy is this. A zombie firm is like that one slow car hogging the fast lane. It's not just about them, it's about all the productive traffic they're holding up right behind them. A single zombie can stop dozens of healthy companies from growing, investing, and creating good jobs.
So for more than a decade, this kind of broken system has just been limping along. But the party's over. A day of reckoning is coming, and it's coming fast. That cheap life support system that kept these companies alive, it's being switched off.
And here's the absolute heart of the matter. To fight inflation, central banks have been jacking up interest rates. The free money era that created and sustained these zombies in the first place, it's done. Their main survival mechanism is gone.
Trillions. That's the sheer amount of corporate debt that was issued during that cheap money era. And a huge chunk of it is now coming due, which means it has to be refinanced at today's much, much higher interest rates.
This sets up this really terrifying domino effect that people are calling the maturity wall.
So a company that could barely afford its 1% interest payment now has to refinance at maybe 6% or 7%. For a lot of them, that's just impossible. This is probably going to trigger a wave of defaults, which could mean mass layoffs and even panic spreading through the credit markets.
So all of this, it leads policymakers to this incredibly treacherous crossroads. There are no easy answers here, no painless ways out. In fact, it's what some are calling a policy trilemma.
So here are the options. On one hand, central banks can keep interest rates high. This will force the zombies into bankruptcy, finally cleansing the system. But, and it's a big but, it will almost certainly cause a deep and painful recession. The other option? They could cut rates again, save the zombies, and avoid the recession, but that would condemn us to years, maybe even decades, of that sluggish, stagnant growth.
And that really is the impossible choice we're all facing. Do we rip the Band-Aid off, take the short-term pain for long-term health, or do we just keep propping up the living dead and accept a future where our economy is permanently sluggish? The answer to that question is going to define the next decade.